Hotep, greetings. Peace and all that good stuff. What I kind of want to talk about on this video, some of the questions, again, I've been getting via email, so I like to, again, try to address things as a whole, because as I said before, it's too time consuming to try to answer each individual email. But before we do that, a couple quick announcements. This upcoming week, Friday, October 27th at 7 p.m. at Cultural Expressions in Hollywood, Florida, we will be performing the Triad of Light and Darkness ritual. That'll start again 7 p.m. sharp. If you have not received a flyer for that, actually today, technically yesterday, today, cutoff day as of the recording of this video. So as soon as you see this video, you would need to contact us, put yourself on the list if you still plan on attending to come, because we do need a certain amount of items to perform the ritual. Very important. So that, again, that'll take place Friday, October 27th at 7 p.m. at Cultural Expressions in Hollywood, Florida. If you would like the information for the event and the flyer, you can email me at khnum19@gmail.com. Also, after the ritual on Friday, myself and Brother Ravana will be doing a class on what does it mean to be a black adept. We're going to get into some specifics. We'll also discuss the ritual, and we want to make sure you understand the ritual. So afterwards there will be a question and answer dialogue kind of exchange, so you can, for those that are participating and want to really understand what the ritual was about and what they went through. That takes place immediately after the ritual. There will be some drumming at this event also, so if you are attending the event, you might want to wear comfortable footwear so you're able to comfortably move around. Don't recommend you wearing any type of uncomfortable shoes. Okay. Having said that, also, if you are interested in a spiritual consultation, and instead of you contacting me to find out how it works, if you're watching this video, I kind of eliminate that process by kind of telling you now in the beginning of the videos. It lasts up until an hour. I charge $52 to do it. It can be done either in person. If you can't get to me in person, it can be done via social media. Google Hangouts is the method I prefer. It can be done via Skype, emo app, etc. But I do prefer Google Hangouts if you do have Google Hangouts. It can be paid for via PayPal or the Square. And I request you give me 24 to 48 hour notice minimum to schedule you in for the consultation. And how the consultation basically works, we can discuss whatever you want to discuss. Whatever information comes through on my part in reference to you as far as archetypes, ancestral spirits, things of that nature, I will convey that as the consultation goes along, but you pretty much control the consultation and the direction it goes in. We can work in whatever area you are willing to work on and discuss. If you're brand new and you want to talk about getting started on the path, we can do that. If you're experienced or a seasoned veteran and you want to focus on a certain area, we could do that too. So you basically control and dictate the course on how that consultation goes. If you are interested in doing that, again, you can email me at the same email address to set up an appointment to do one, and that email address again is khnum19@gmail.com. All right, having gotten that stuff out of the way, mastering witchcraft and black magic. How does one do that? These are questions we get. And as I said before, consistency is the key in anything that you do. And it doesn't just apply to witchcraft and black magic. It applies to, if you're an athlete, it applies to your career, your profession, or your job. You're going to find, to be successful, period, at anything in life, you must have consistency put into that. You always hear us using the term, you must do the work, you must put in the work. And as I've said before in previous videos, a lot of people don't put in enough of work, and then they'll complain and bitch about not getting results. So step one is, before you set out on this path, how seriously committed are you? That's the question you need to ask. Question your motives, because these are the preliminary stages or steps into mastering witchcraft or black magic. You must first and foremost ask yourself, what is my purpose for going down this path? Why do I want to do this? What am I trying to accomplish, and what am I trying to obtain? If you don't have clear-cut answers to those questions, then you might want to reevaluate what it is you're actually doing. If you do have clear-cut answers to those questions, then you have worked your way to progressing on the beginning stages of the path. Now, what one also has to do, and this is the most important thing, you have to do or get yourself set in a process where you can be receptive of these energies. And what I mean by that is, when you start out on this path, there's going to be extreme change, okay? Intense change. It could be dramatic change, but I can tell you it's going to be extreme. And this is kind of, I found in my years in doing this and working with people and knowing people over the years that travel the same path, this becomes the hardest part for people to deal with, that transition period. Some don't prepare themselves enough mentally for the change that's getting ready to come as soon as you make the intent, to work this path. The reason why some people are not prepared, as I said before, is because they've tried to categorize or identify the change that they're looking for, thinking that's the change they need. But this path brings the change that you need, and some people get the change that they need with the change that they want. And that can be dramatic. That can be a lot to deal with if you have not prepared yourself. And what do I mean by that? I've watched people who came into this path and who, quote unquote, thought their lives were consistent and were trying to better that, but then they found out as they progressed on this path, they found out they were with the wrong person in the wrong relationship. They weren't in the right career or profession. Their circle of friends, their social circle, things of that nature, they started to come to the realization that everything they thought that they were doing that was correct was really, they were just masking what was wrong about everything around them. And what tends to happen on this path, you do a stock of, your environment. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So first and foremost, one must be prepared to embrace extreme change. You must be prepared for that. Now, I've seen it go the flip route, where some people, again, have come into this path. They were kind of on the right direction, but needed improvement in some areas. That happens too. So I'm not just going to paint the picture that you're going to come on this path and find that everything else that you're doing is wrong. So that's not the picture that I'm painting. I am saying, because each individual is different and unique, whether it's literal changes physically, there will be drastic changes mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. Because you'll be put to the test on everything that you accept as a reality and truth. Which brings me to my next point in preparing yourself correctly. Regardless of where and what background you came from spiritually or religiously, you should only be able now to draw upon that as a reference point or experience, because all that shit is obsolete when you start working witchcraft and black magic, because there is no dogmas, faith, and belief systems and limitations and things that you might quote on, that are out of the norm when working this path. So you must be able to discipline yourself and get yourself in the mindset to realize that everything up until this point that you learned served a purpose and a point in your life to get you to where you are right now. This is the threshold of the path that you're supposed to actually be on, because this is a path of self-mastery, a path of self-deification. This is the path that's going to bring out the God or the goddess in you instead of just reading about it, talking about it. So you have to be willing to put all of that aside when working witchcraft and magic. Whether you're working what we call lesser black magic, which is the method of black magic you would be using on a more frequent and regular basis. You have medial black magic, which is between lesser and greater, and then obviously you have greater black magic, which is used specifically, to get something accomplished that's very difficult, or to get something accomplished. It could be a ritual where you're protecting yourself against something that, or I shouldn't say something, or somebody that might be out to do you harm, etc. Or you might want to manipulate a situation and bring that situation in your favor, and it might take intense work on the subjective realm to do that. So one has to come in on this path with a clean slate of mind, not being influenced by what they thought they previously known. It doesn't mean you can't draw upon some of them experiences, because you will be able to draw upon some past experiences to help you in the moment, but you can't get caught back there. You can't get stuck in your old ways, because this path is going to challenge, as I said earlier, everything you think you know. And it's a path where, again, you have to take full responsibility for your successes and your failures. So there's nobody to blame if you fail at this but yourself. And sometimes people set a high bar of expectations that are not real, and then when they fail, then all of a sudden they want to blame something external, and they don't want to take the responsibility themselves. And that's a bunch of bullshit, because you're going to find out 9 out of 10 times, as I said, people weren't putting in the work, or they were setting unrealistic expectations for themselves, and you don't want to do that. So you want to also make sure you, again, are clear in your intent. You have been willing to, reprogram and be retaught everything you've been taught. And as long as you're willing to do that and the intent is clear, then you can start to proceed down on this path. Now, what does witchcraft and magic entail? I mean, that we could be here all day doing a class on that, but we'll talk about some of the basics and the particulars. Okay, remember, magic or using magic and witchcraft is basically something a magician, whether you want to call that person a magician, a witch, a warlock, whatever title gets you through the day, uses those energies and that spiritual science to manipulate the elements, number one, to manipulate a situation in the sense where they can go into their subjective realm and alter it and bring that into their objective realm to make it a reality, which takes a lot of intense work, whether it's a financial situation, whether you're working love spells or love rituals, if you're trying to attract an individual to you, if you're working a sex magic ritual or a spell where you're trying to gain or grab somebody maybe just for lustful or sexual purposes. Now, a lot of these things might not seem the norm, but these are attributes and part of our nature. We are those type of beings. There is a path of indulgence on this path that one has to come to the realization of. That is not unique on any other path. And what do I mean by that? You're taught on most spiritual paths that indulging in the physical is a weakness. Indulging in the physical is something bad. Don't give in to your physical desires. Suppress all your physical desires. And then you're given bullshit methodologies to do that. Become a Buddhist and meditate and discipline yourself. It all sounds good on the surface, but all you're doing is really suppressing your true nature, your real nature. And with that suppression or resistance, more persistence comes to the surface. So if you are suppressing certain sexual desires, and again, and I've said this before in previous classes, not to be consumed by those desires, but you must appease those desires to a point where they're satisfied. So the challenge in that aspect of working this path is knowing where the boundaries are, knowing again to feed that indulgence, but not be consumed by it. And that's the discipline. How does one do that? Well, you definitely have to set boundaries and goals for yourself when you work any aspect of this path. So anytime you go into a ritualistic working or you're working witchcraft or magic, you should have a plan laid out. You should have your intent fueled, and you should be clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish and why. And it should make sense to you. If it makes sense to you, then you'll have success at it. Now, as we said before, if you're trying to be a multi-platinum singer and you ain't got a lick of talent, and you think that you're gonna do some ritual and it's gonna fix all that, that's not realistic expectation. Okay? Some people go into it with that mindset. So if you're gonna do something like that, you obviously would have to be a talented singer. You understand? This is part of analyzing your ritual or your work before you do it, and feeling the intent and seeing if it's in accordance and if it's realistic. So I'm using that as a metaphor. So if you're a terrible singer, just because you love music and you want to be a singer, you need to really check yourself. Do you have talent in that area? And can you manipulate and work a ritual to enhance, to speed that process up? Yes, you can if the natural talent and ability is there. But if you're a fucking horrible singer, I can tell you this, you're wasting your time. That's not what magic is. It's not a spooky fix-all, snap your finger. Because when people hear the word magic, unfortunately, a lot of indoctrination still comes to mind. They think of fucking Harry Potter and wizards, or they think of Satanism and all these stereotypes that you see in the media, on the internet, in the movies, etc. That's not what we mean when we say magic on this path. As I said before, magic, the key aspect of magic is manipulation of the subconscious mind. What do we mean when we say manipulation of the subconscious mind? Being able to train and discipline the subconscious mind to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve by way of tapping into your subjective realm. That's real magic. I want to make that clear. I've said that before numerous times in previous classes and videos, etc. That's what we need to be conscious of when we understand what real magic is. Now, the black aspect of when we use the term black magic, why do we use that term? Because there is a dark aspect of that, especially when coming in the beginning stages of this path and trying to master witchcraft and black magic. The science of that is you have to be willing to tap in to the deep abyss, the darkest point, or the deepest point of your subconscious mind, and address anything internal that you're dealing with. That could be things as far back as your childhood that you neglected that might be having an effect on you today, and you're not conscious of it, or you may be conscious of it. That could be a bad relationship with your mother or father that emotionally has scarred you and affects you to this day. Unfortunately, you might be somebody that was sexually abused, and you've swept that under the rug and maybe have not dealt with it head on, and you think by just ignoring it and sweeping it under the rug that it's going to go away. You might have to face and address that demon so you can move past it. You might have been an individual that could have been raped, or you might have been an individual that was robbed in a situation that was frightening. You could have been bullied as a kid. I'm just giving you a multitude of scenarios, because sometimes when we have a traumatic situation in our past life, what we tend to do is jump into a spiritual system that will mask and suppress that trauma, and it creates the illusion that we've bypassed it or we've overcome it. What it really has done is just hidden it and suppressed it, but there will be a point where that suppression rises to the surface and you will have to deal with that shit. On this path, if you really are serious about it, you're going to have to deal with it. It's not an option. Okay? It's not a choice. You will have to address all the good things and the bad things about yourself. And a lot of that personal trauma that we've gathered, as we call excess baggage through the course of our life, must be addressed and mastered. Okay? So that's what it means when it says working black magic or dark magic. This is one aspect of it. You must go into the inner depths of your subconscious mind and address all that shit head on like a champ and overcome and master it. If I'm going to be honest with you, if you're not willing to do that, this is not the path for you. I can tell you that right now. You will find that out at some point, on this path. It will come to the surface as a reality. And this is what I mean when I've said in the past on previous videos. You always hear me saying, you can't fake the funk on this path. You can't bullshit people. And most of all, you can't bullshit yourself. Because by bullshitting yourself more than anything, you're actually doing more harm to yourself. You're playing a game with yourself. You're creating more problems for yourself, whether you're conscious of it or not. That is a huge problem. So things are going to come to the surface about you that you don't like. You have to be willing to say to yourself, I'm willing to deal with this. I'm willing to take those weaknesses and make them strengths. So these are all preliminary steps before one can even think about mastering witchcraft and magic and doing spiritual work on this path. You must do all these preliminary steps first. Okay? This is important because if you bypass all of these steps and then you think you're just going to jump in and start doing working with all types of different energy and magic, and you're fucked up and you haven't really done a inventory of yourself, it's going to create more harm than good for you, because you are opening yourself up to a lot of different energies. And if the psyche is not prepared to ingest and assimilate this energy, it can actually cause problems. It can create mental problems, mental instability. And I don't say this to scare people or put people in a state of fear, but this is a reality, because this is a scientific and a medical fact. This is not some spooky religious bullshit. One's psyche and mind must be prepared. You must be in a sound mind and a sound body. So another preliminary step, what is your health? Are you in good health? I'm not talking about you have to be a perfect physical specimen and nothing wrong with you. That's not what I'm saying. Are you in overall general good health? Especially mentally. If there's any mental issues there, that's something that would need to be addressed, because that could pose a problem. Because when you're working with a multitude of entities and archetypes and spirits, depending on what path you're working, especially if you're working, say, with spirits of the dead, things of that nature, your psyche has to be prepared for those experiences. Because I've also seen where some people think that they're ready, and they freak out when they get to a certain point in this journey where something happens to them and they get scared, and I've seen them go right back to maybe doing what it is they used to do prior. Whether that was nothing, or maybe they used to be a Christian, they go back. I've seen people scared right back into Christianity. I've seen that too. Because you will come face to face with the real self. Okay? And if you're not prepared for that, you need to maybe reconsider. Because the hardest pill to swallow on this path, when you start to come to the realization that, man, there's a lot of shit about myself that I was fucking not addressing. There was a lot you find that there's a certain part of me that I was suppressing. You know, you might have a certain level of rage in you and anger, and you don't know how to utilize that anger and emotion and energy for your benefit. You might have realized that you might need, let's say, more sex or more sexual energy, and you've been suppressing it, and it's caused a mental imbalancement in you, where because you haven't been able to feed and appease that desire, it's affected you in other areas spiritually. And it does, if trust me when I tell you, it does if you do not address that. Some people are ashamed of their sexual desires when speaking on this topic of sex, unfortunately. And shame in that area is something you definitely have to get over on this path. If you are not in tune with your sexuality, and like I said, whatever that is, that's your business. I don't judge anything or anybody for it. But you must be able to understand and accept your sexuality, your sex drive, your desires. And how well are you appeasing those things, other than the fact that you're just ignoring them. Let me give you an example. If you're forcing yourself to stay in a monogamous relationship, and you know you're not monogamous, that suppression is going to rise to the surface. Trust me when I tell you that. It could work vice versa. If you're forcing yourself maybe to be with multiple partners, and that's not really who you are, then that could cause a problem too. So I'm saying it works both ways, but understand your sexuality, because the sex force, you're going to find out on this path, more than any other path, is addressed head on. And the problem that most people in most other quote-unquote conscious circles, sex is not talked about in the correct context. It's always taboo. There's always these restrictions and rules and regulations you should and should not follow. And that just does not work. Because let's keep it real. Some people by nature are sexual freaks. They have a high level sex drive. And it needs to be fed to a certain extent. Now again, as I said earlier, not to the point where it consumes them, but to the point where they need to experience and indulge in some of their desires. And this is an issue that people struggle and fight with. Then they become addicted. When they're not getting gratification in some areas, it leads them to do things that become an addiction. Let's say being addicted to pornography and things of that nature. And again, I'm not saying if you do or do not watch pornography that makes you a bad person. We're going to talk like adults. But if that's all you do constantly, 20, 8, 9, 10 times a day, then that becomes an addiction. So, same thing with food. So what I'm trying to say is you got to set the boundaries for indulgence. But the doctrine of indulgence is also a part of mastering witchcraft and black magic. If you're not willing to indulge, you're gonna basically at some point fail on this path. Because one cannot master something unless they indulge in it. Because it's just like I use the food thing. You can be consumed by food if you overeat, but how do you know you're gonna like or dislike a food until you actually taste or try it? So if you have sexual desires, say to be with one person or to be in a sexual relationship with 2 or 3 people, or to be in a threesome, or whatever it is, if you're not addressing these things, they become suppressed. And as I said before, you might be with your partner, your spouse, your husband, your wife, and as I've said before in the past, there's no communication between most people in relationships. So most people don't even know what the other individual likes because they're afraid to maybe communicate on that level. And I found people that I've worked with in the past found out later down the road that their spouses were both into the same thing. And now it might be vice versa, where they may not be having it or they're not into that thing, but the only way you're going to find out is via communication. That must be discussed because that's what keeps any type of healthy partnership or relationship or union. So that's one aspect. The path of indulgence, food, recreational activities, fun, all of these things are part of the path of indulgence and are necessary because you are a human physical being. You do live on the physical realm, and you do need to, on a certain level, to indulge in certain physical pleasures. Anybody that tells you otherwise is a fucking fool. Anybody that's trying to sell you a spiritual system and play the Hare Krishna bullshit and it's about meditation, peace and love, don't be in the world, blah. If people are going to tell you don't be in the world of the world, then just tell them to go kill themselves and speed up their death and go to this spiritual abode that they claim that that's all about. There is a part of a human aspect on this path called the path of indulgence. And one must be willing to explore that path to really understand themselves. That's a part of it. Once you feel like, and I'm doing this because this is important to understand. If you want in-depth methodologies on how does one know if this path is for them, these are things you have to ask yourself and not be ashamed or afraid to ask yourself. Where do you stand in some of the things up until this point in this video that I've talked about? This will give you a good gauge of where you're at. So before you can even master witchcraft and black magic, you must find out if it's actually for you. Now, obviously, when one starts to work this path, there are many spells and magical rituals to do. You can work, again, as I said before, for finances, love, for pure destruction if need be. But working with that destructive energy, one must be in a clear cut, as I've said before in the past, a path that's something that they want to do and that they're in the right, and then that they have no remorse if that type of work needs to be done. And you should be an individual where if all you're doing is destructive work, then something's fucking wrong with you. I mentioned this a few weeks back. It's normal that you should have some enemies. Because if you don't have some enemies, then something's fucking wrong with you too. And as I said before, if you're so well liked and loved and everybody likes and loves you and you have no enemies, then there's also something fucking wrong with you. You're a weak-minded individual and people take advantage of you. So what I'm trying to say is it's a fine line in between. You should have some enemies. You should have people that that you would, wish, to not be a nuisance in your life, and people that you wish to bless or bestow blessings upon them. It should be a whole conglomeration or a balancement in the sense of not too much of one or the other, because then it's something wrong with your character. Because if you have some enemies, you're doing something right. And again, if everybody loves you and nobody hates you, and most people think that in their mind, then you're a weak-minded individual again, and people know how to take advantage of you. So this is key in understanding this. One must be clear cut on that. And then the last thing I kind of want to get into on this, and again, I'm talking about the preliminary. One must do these things to master witchcraft and black magic first. You should do, when you feel like that this path is for you, you should do some type of initiation, whether it's a self-initiation or in a group initiation, where you are giving yourself openly and freely by your own free will and accord to work with these energies. And the initiation should be centered around you being willing to divest yourself of all the previous shit that you used to do or were involved in, and you've accepted it. It served its purpose to get you to where you're at, but you're willing to shed all that and start anew, and willing to embrace working with these energies, these archetypes, these spirits, these deities, because it's going to be new to you. It's going to be something that you haven't worked with before, that you're willing to be receptive and work with this energy. Now, part of the ritual, and I'm not going to get into it all in depth, part of the ritual that we actually will be doing on the 27th, this upcoming Friday, deals with some of the stuff that I'm talking about tonight. And that's the only thing I'm going to basically get into with that, because, again, people need to experience it. But I can assure you that that's what that ritual will deal with to an extent, coming to that realization. So these are the things that you should do. These are the things you should be looking for. When one has done these things, then one can start to progress on this path and start mastering witchcraft and magic. The problem is a lot of people don't do any of the aforementioned things. They just read a few books. They get interested in occult topics or black magic topics. And because of the, being so enthused and interested with the topic, they dive in without doing any preparation. They don't pace themselves. They didn't do enough of research and study. It just kind of became something that, got their interest, and they became sparked and enthused. And then what tends to happen is they reach a point where they come on this path because they weren't prepared. Something happens and it just doesn't work out for them. They don't get the results. They set an unrealistic bar of expectations, etc. This is all important. So if you feel, and you're watching this and you feel like you've done that and you are on this path, then power to you, But if you're listening to this video and you haven't done them things and you're running into a lot of struggles, then maybe you need to recheck and reevaluate some of the aforementioned things that we were just talking about. Look, like I said before, man, and I can't stress this enough. On this path, you're responsible for your success and your failures. There is no God, Jesus, or Jehovah, or Allah, or any other external being that you've been indoctrinated with as a young child, at birth, from a young child to an adult, before you came into this state of consciousness, that is going to be here to assist or help you. And there's nothing, and you can't shift the blame to any of these fictitious mythological gods. Okay? Because the only God that's responsible for that success or failures is you. And see, that's where it becomes a little challenging, because if you are God, the center of your universe, right? You're supposed to be, where everything evolves around you. Because when you have mastered witchcraft and black magic, you are in the center of all things at all times. And this is what I mean when I've said on previous videos, you're able to control your immediate environment. It's like your own personal circle. And everything within that circle that is around you cannot be penetrated unless allowed. So this is why another illusion is in a lot of conscious circles where people set out on a lot of spiritual paths because they think they're going to save the world. Or they think they're going to save their people. And you can't save or do shit for anything, anybody, if you're fucked up yourself. You can't help others if you can't help yourself. And that's where a lot of problems come in on this path. People get on a save the world mission and they ain't right themselves. And this is why it does not work. So this is why we say it's a path of self-mastery. You must master self before you can master anything else. So that's what it's about. I'm going to leave it there. I hope this addressed some of the emails and questions I got, because I get a lot of these questions on and off about where to start, where to begin. The one that I don't like is what should I and should not do? And I keep telling people when I get that question, that's not going to be the same answer for every individual. You should do whatever gets results for you and works. And you should not do shit that you might be doing for a long period of time, ain't doing shit for you. Just eliminate that shit out of your spiritual routine, etc. So one must find their niche to find out what it is they should and should not do. Because again, that's going to be different for everybody. So as far as the questions along the line, where do I begin? How do I start? How do I know if this path is for me? These things, that the aforementioned things that I mentioned in this video, you should be able to ask yourself these questions and have clear, concise answers to them. Because I never paint a picture to anybody on this path that it's easy. It actually becomes more harder on this path, because having the knowledge of knowing responsibility comes with that. So another illusion I see many people do over the years is they come on this path and they think they're not going to have any more problems, that all their problems are going to magically disappear. Well, you attract so much different energy to you, it becomes more challenging on this path. And that's what I mean when I say you'll be tested. And how well can you put all that in perspective to work for you? That's the challenge. That's what we call when we say it's a path to self-mastery, because you yourself have to create your own spiritual path that's going to work for you. It's that simple. It's the best way I can put it. So, long story short, I'm going to wrap it up. I hope that helps for those that have sent emails. I hope that pushes you in the right direction. I hope this motivates you. And again, if I can get you thinking and stimulate that brain, then I've done my job, regardless of if you agree with me or not. Again, I'm not interested if you agree with me or not. I'm not interested if you like or love me. That's all personal, emotional shit that you're going to have to get over. But what I am interested in is if I can get people to think outside the box, then I've done my job. It's that simple. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, for those that are coming to the event on Friday, October 27th, Cultural Expressions in Hollywood, Florida. I'll see you people out there on Friday. Again, if you would like information on that event, if you would like us to send you over the flyer, or you would like information on the consultation, you can email me again at khnum19@gmail.com. Peace.